The BBC has been caught on two separate occasions using doctored footage of the January 6th insurrection. Now, the first one was on a panorama programme, which was a pre-recorded programme, so they knew what they were doing. They took the time to record a programme before they pumped that out. The second one was on a live broadcast on Newsnight. Now, for me, I'm not going to get into any of the media bias arguments because I don't think that's where the true issue is. I think there's three parts or three strands to this story, which I will cover with you. But first of all, here's a reminder of the doctored footage that we're talking about.
We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and I'll be there with you, and we fight. We fight like hell. We're going to walk down to the Capitol, and we're going to cheer on our brave senators and congressmen and women.
So it's quite clear, anybody watching that, they can see that that's been doctored heavily to make Donald Trump look like a warmongering lunatic. Now, you would think that this is indefensible, and cue Matthew Stadlin on GB News attempting to cover this over with, it was just a bit of a mistake, nothing to see here, but then also turning on free speech at the end. And I thought this whole segment here was fascinating on many levels.
As far as I can assure you of almost anything, the idea that Newsnight journalists were sitting around thinking, how can we stitch up Trump or doctor footage? I'm almost certain that is not what went on.
Yeah, but even with that Newsnight situation, as you say, it was highlighted by a pro-Trump guest on the programme. As we understand it, in the editorial meeting after the show or the following morning, it was just dismissed. Now, if I'd have done that in some of my previous days when I was producing, I'd have been fired for that.
Well, as I say, I think it was poor editorial judgment. I worked at the BBC for 8.5 years. I bent over backwards to be both impartial and accurate.
Well, so you should.
Indeed, you should. And it's right that the BBC is scrutinised. Let me also be clear about that. I am a defender of the BBC. I think that in a world of disinformation and misinformation, in a world of X, where Elon Musk owns it.
Well, hold on.
No, let me make the point.
Hold on.
Disinformation, or certainly misinformation. We need a public service broadcaster that is committed to impartiality and accuracy. Of course, where it makes mistakes, it should be held accountable, and it has apologised.
But as you say, in an age of misinformation and disinformation, the BBC, on two of its flagship news and current affairs shows, has aired something which is misinformation and disinformation.
No, so there's a distinction between misinformation and disinformation. As I say, I do not think this was deliberate. I don't think they were deliberately setting out these journalists or producers.
You've sat in an edit suite, Matthew. I've spent hours sat in edit suites. That sort of thing does not happen.
If you look at X, which is where a lot of people now get their news, it is awash with misinformation and disinformation. Elon Musk, let me just make the point. Elon Musk himself has shared misinformation. I think it is a very dangerous environment, and I think it is threatening to our democracy. In that context,
the TV licence is £174.50, or if you're paying monthly direct debit, that's £14.54 a month. Now, against the backdrop of the cost of living crisis, I think this is a despicable thing to charge people. And I know the word despicable is thrown around quite a lot by people, but I think this here is despicable, because if you've got a normal pensioner, for instance, who is in receipt of full state pension or just the state pension, and they aren't receiving pension credits, and pension credits are there in order to help people who don't have or who haven't worked enough to get the full state pension. So pension credits, those are exceptionally poor pensioners, and the BBC does give them the licence fee for free. But let's say you're one of those unfortunate people and selfish people that's worked all their life and paid into the system, and you would get your full pension. Well, for those people there who have, been very diligent and worked forever, they get charged £14.54 a month for the privilege of watching this garbage on television. And I think that's despicable when you look at the backdrop of the cost of living. I don't have to tell you the cost of things at the moment. Generally, people are struggling with paying their bills. You know yourself, you've got all of the direct debits that are no doubt flying out of your account on a monthly basis, and everything is increased. But against the backdrop of a cost of living crisis, charging old people whose only lifeline in a lot of instances is watching the television and gaining some entertainment from it, because as we know, old people aren't on the internet all the time. They tend to use their televisions more than younger people because that's how they were brought up, and that's fine. And to charge those people is despicable, and there's no other way to look at it at all. It's indefensible, in my opinion, to charge pensioners to watch this. Never mind charging the rest of the people who wake up, their alarm clock goes off, you roll out of bed, go to work. All the while, you've got the BBC taking money out of your account every month for the privilege of watching some technology. And this kind of goes in, this is a segue into my second issue with the BBC, and that's one of technological freedom. Now, if I ask you to walk around your home today and look at any element of technology, no matter what it is, it could be your fridge freezer, it could be your car, it could be your light bulb, it could be anything, any piece of technology in your home at this moment. And the question I would ask you is that technology licensed? Are you paying a monthly fee to use that technology? And the answer to that is no, you're not. The only technology that's licensed within your home is the television and the BBC. And this is a kind of a 50-year out-of-date model. And it's a 20th century hangover that we've got in an age of subscription services. And to believe in 2025 that in order to watch television when you don't even have to watch the BBC, and you're being charged for that, that's ridiculous. That argument there can't be made simply because you can't license technology. There's no reason to license technology, and the arguments about, oh, well, they provide a good source of news. I don't care what they do. Licensing technology is patently ridiculous in, the 21st century. The BBC needs to move to a subscription model. If it's so good and if everyone wants to use it, then let them stand up on their own. If they're going to have to cut back on some services, then cut back on all of the things that you do. I don't care. It's not my problem. In order to use a piece of technology, you should not have to pay for it. It's a little bit like giving Hotpoint £15 a month to use a fridge freezer. That's the ridiculous level of licensing technology that we've reached with this argument, and I think that's stupid. And the final thing that Matthew was attempting to swerve the argument into was the online safety element, and democracy is at peril here, and that's why we need the BBC as a news source and everything else. Well, perhaps X is a bit of a cesspit, and perhaps a lot of social media platforms are like that as well, but that's called free speech, and when you allow people to say what they want, people are going to say all sorts of stuff, because the human species, we're a varied bunch, and there's some nasty people amongst us, there's some nice people, but generally if you allow people to say what they want, and they are allowed to say it in an anonymous way, then what you find is that people act in a way that they want to. And that's what we're dealing with here. We're not kind of brushing everything under the carpet here and pretending everything's all right. On X, you get people's uncensored opinion, and that in itself is called free speech. And of course, what the left want to do, they want to push you into a channel where you're watching a certain type of news presented to you, which allows them to manipulate the population. And they don't like where this argument is going. They don't want to be discussing grooming gangs of a morning every day, as is on X. They don't want to be talking about the amount of illegal migrants coming across into our country all the time. They don't want to be talking about Rachel Reeves' mishandling of the economy every single day. They don't want to be talking about all of the government scandals scandals that are going on every week now with this Labour Party, and all of the corruption and the collusion that's going on. They don't want to be doing that. The BBC is covered by very strict regulation, and for that reason they don't report on everything. And so the three things that I've shown you there today are the real arguments. Charging old people is despicable. You can't license technology, and thank you very much, but if the BBC is going to be your only source of trusted news, then you're in deep trouble. We're in 2025, the world has moved on, and you can't be charging people for this. There has to be a subscription model brought in, and we are moving towards that. But we shall see what happens the next time this receives its royal assent. And this is coming up at the end of 2027, so it's not too far away. So the BBC will be extremely worried at this point. But if our politicians continue with this licence fee post-27, then I think there's going to be an uproar the next time they do this. I can't see the licence fee going beyond the end of 2027. The old people shouldn't be paying for it, the young people aren't watching it, and it just needs to be scrapped, and the BBC needs to stand on its own 2 feet, and I'm guessing that most of the people listening to this would agree with me. Thanks very much for your time.